So Bird Box is the latest gimmicky horror movie in a string of gimmicky horror movies. From Hush to A Quiet Place, it seems like horror movies these days need to have some weird thing to them to make them successful. Whether it's this character not being able to speak, or these characters not being able to hear, or in this movie's case, the main characters not being able to see, which is just a great gimmick that I'm sure will not lead to this movie's own self-destruction. I'm sure. So the film does what every great movie does, and opens on something kind of interesting and then immediately cuts to 5 years earlier, where Sandra Bullock is an artist for some reason, which literally doesn't matter to anything.
Wow, such venom.
I got that venom, not knowing when I'm never gonna slow up in 'em.
Not only is Sandra Bullock incidentally an artist, but she's also pregnant. So she goes with her sister to get an ultrasound of the baby, where the movie wastes literally no time getting into the action.
God damn it, stop it, please stop it!
Oh, can you imagine the baby right now? Already, this movie has some scary similarities to one of the greatest unintentional comedies of all time, The Happening.
My firearm is my friend.
Which is a movie about some unseen force making people kill themselves in spectacularly hilarious fashion. Hey, is that
Eminem?
So, if you haven't gathered already, this is the whole movie. You have a story and a B story. Story A follows Sandra Bullock and her unlikely band of misfits that sit in a house for most of the movie. And story B is about Sandra Bullock sitting on a boat with some kids for most of the movie. But the weird thing is that it didn't need to be this way. The movie doesn't need to be non-linear. It just decides that it wants to be for some reason. The story is just about Sandra Bullock getting from point A to point B. So why did you have to chop it up and make two different stories about one story? I don't understand the point of doing that. Having this movie told in this fashion is just completely worthless. Movies like Pulp Fiction are told in a non-linear way because it makes that movie better to have it non-linear. Movies like Memento are better because they're non-linear. They have more characters, more plot threads, and more interesting things happening so that it can be able to cut to multiple stories. But here, in Bird Box, it's one story that's chopped up into a non-linear format for absolutely no reason. This movie is just about a woman that is trying to survive in the apocalypse. So what was the point of chopping this into an A story and a B story? You could have just started where the story starts and ended where it ends without diverging into two different or multiple different stories. That is completely worthless. So Sandra Bullock and company sit around the house until it cuts to her sitting in a boat before immediately cutting back. So you see what I'm saying? This is just a worthless form of storytelling for this movie. Non-linear storytelling can be incredibly compelling, but not here. Having an A story and a B story can be incredibly compelling, but not here. Because the A story and the B story is about the same person. So when the A story and B story intersect, there's nothing interesting that happens. They just intersect. And when you have an A story and a B story, most of the time you want to structure your movie around that gimmick. You want to structure it in a way so that you're telling one story, and at the peak of that story's interestingness, you cut to the B story. And then when that reaches its peak climax of this segment, you cut to the A story. And then you have just interesting thing after interesting thing happening, and then cutting in between each interesting thing and building up to the next. That is the sole reason that you have an A and a B story, so that you're telling two equally compelling stories simultaneously, which will probably inevitably cross ways to make the most interesting thing happen. But that is not what this movie does. This movie just has some interesting things happening, and then it cuts to some boring things happening before it cuts back to some interesting things, and then boring things and interesting things, and so on. Anyway, they realize that the house has cameras streaming a live feed from all around the house, so they decide to watch them to see if they can catch the monster on camera. So they tie the guy from Jurassic World to a chair so that he won't kill himself if he sees it. But what's to stop him from, you know, standing up and jumping out a window or bashing his head against the desk? And is no one going to watch him in case he does one of these things? You don't have to watch the monitor, you just have to watch him. Just sit in a chair near the door and make sure he doesn't try and kill himself. Did you guys think this through at all? Oh, I guess not.
We're never getting out of here. No one's coming for us. No one's coming for us.
The trouble that a lot of these horror movies these days have is that they have a complete lack of logic, which is a cliche that is running so rampantly through these horror movies that even commercials have taken notice and are making fun of this cliche.
Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
It's one thing to have a movie that's aware of how stupid it is, so it just has its characters make the dumbest decisions possible for the sake of comedy. But it's another thing entirely to have a movie like this one that tries to take itself so seriously, and when it makes characters make dumb decisions, it just stands out. So this segment's most interesting point has just occurred, which means you should cut away to the B story to keep the audience interested in what's going to happen next. But this movie doesn't do that because it's structured very poorly. So instead of cutting to something actually interesting after this crazy thing happened, we just watch Sandra Bullock talking to people.
Have you thought about names yet?
No, not yet. How about you?
Well, if it's a girl, we wanted to name her like Ariel or Jasmine.
So now we learn that people can just not wear blindfolds and just be a little crazy, which is really the first scene that calls into question the rules and logic of this film's universe, and the lack thereof.
Okay, I know you're scared. Well, listen, there's no need. I'm not here to hurt you. I can pull you to shore. Take your goddamn blindfold off!
Any good horror movie has consistent rules that it sets for itself to make you scared for the characters. When you know what's supposed to be hunting the characters and what they can do to prevent being hunted, then you can be scared for them. The problem is, this movie is not consistent, it doesn't set anything up that's interesting, and it breaks its own rules. You can't just constantly be vague about everything that's happening and expect your audience to just attempt to fill in the blanks, because there are a lot of blanks being left open here. So let's see what we've learned so far. So far we've learned that there are invisible monsters that if you look at them, you will kill yourself. So how does the monster do this? Well, we don't learn that. So what does the monster look like? Well, you never see it. Okay, so why do some people kill themselves when they see the monsters, but others don't? Well, you never learn that either. And this is the problem. The movie never explains or shows you why you should be scared of the monster. It never tells you why the monster is threatening. It just says, there's an invisible monster, and if you look at it, you'll die, except for sometimes when you don't. And as I always say, you can't be scared when you're confused. And right now, I am incredibly confused. But maybe, just maybe, going forward in these two different stories, we'll learn through some exposition or from some new characters that the monster has some weakness, or that you can get around it by doing this thing or something. Maybe, hopefully.
Bad news. All right, we're running out of food and there's no help coming. We've got to get outside.
Look, I might know where we can get more.
Where, Charlie?
The Fields Market. Look, I locked the place up when everything started going crazy. Right?
So now our genius heroes realize that they're running low on food and that they need to go get more. So they decide that driving to a supermarket down the road is a better plan than just walking to any number of houses closer to them. Driving blind down the road to a store after the rapture just happened seems like a terrible idea when you could just walk to the house right next door and plunder whatever they have in there. Why did you decide to drive? Why did you decide to go to a supermarket? I mean, they must have doors, glass doors and windows in there, right? Wouldn't it be safer to just go to a house and close all their windows and just loot them? But again, the film defies logic and does the dumbest thing possible anyway. So they get to the store that conveniently has blackout curtains on the windows and glass doors that just aren't see-through. But they get their food and Sandra acquires her undying birds that she manages to have by the end of the film, despite them being locked in a store without food for who knows how long, surviving 5 years with this crazy broad and being dropped in a river.
Birdies? Yeah, they seem to sense when the creatures are around.
Okay, so if the birds can sense the monster, why not just keep them around at all times to alert you when a monster's close so that you know when to put your blindfold on and when you can have it off? The movie makes it seem like these monsters are just constantly around and that you always have to have a blindfold on or you'll just immediately go insane. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because if a bird can sense the monster, then that means that the monsters aren't always around. So why not use the birds to be able to travel to somewhere new and using them as like an alarm system to when you have to put the blindfold on? It'd be a pretty easy way to get from point A to point B. But they just don't do that. Because I guess everyone in this house is just a complete moron, including Sandra Bullock, the character that made the discovery that the birds can sense the monsters. So now that that craziness with the store is over, the movie just decides that instead of cutting to the river, which might actually be interesting, it'll just stick with this boring group of characters where we watch them talk. How fun. I love this movie and am definitely frightened and on the edge of my seat.
I know what you think of me, what everybody thinks of me in the divorce petition. My first wife said that to call me a creep would be an affront to creeps everywhere.
So now I guess
Eminem
and the hot cop girl just decide to ditch the group for a reason I still cannot comprehend. I mean, just imagine the conversation they must have had before bailing on this group. Hey, let's ditch these fools. Good idea, but where would we go? I don't know, but we could take this car with limited fuel and attempt to drive through the complete chaos outside until we inevitably break down or kill ourselves. Okay, makes sense to me. But now we're finally back with River Sandra, where she goes and loots some church in the middle of nowhere, and that's it. Yay. But this is just another scene that calls into question the rules of this monster. If it can affect its surroundings like it can here, why can't it break through glass? Why can't it attack people physically? It seems like it could, but it just never does. All it ever does is rustle some leaves and whisper sweet nothings in people's ears to try and get them to take their blindfolds off.
Hey, how you doing, little mama? Let me whisper in your ear. Tell you something that you might like to hear. It's free real estate.
So now the girl from Dumplin decides to let some weirdo into their house who tells them that some crazy people broke into his house and tried to make him look at the monsters.
These crazy guys weren't affected like everyone else. They wanted to see. They were happy.
But turns out he did look at the monsters and he is actually crazy. Isn't that a fun, insane reveal? Doesn't it make a ton of sense and doesn't leave you with any questions about this circumstance whatsoever? Well, not me. This makes absolutely no sense and further confuses me on the rules and logic of this universe. Why do some people that see the monster go immediately crazy and not him? Why does he come into the house wearing a blindfold? Did he want to trick them into letting him in so that he could kill them? Did he see the monster in between coming in the house and wanting to kill them? If he had all of these drawings of the monster, which by the way are as vague as I think they could have possibly made them, how did no one check them? Needless to say, I'm entirely confused now, and the movie seems to make it worse with every subsequent scene. But suddenly, and without warning, both pregnant women go into labor at exactly the same time. But this is pretty convenient because it draws literally everyone's attention away from this crazy guy's crazy shenanigans. If only one person was available to see this crazy guy doing crazy things. If only one person had checked his bag to see he had crazy person drawings. Oof, if only this movie followed its own rules and made any kind of sense. So everyone dies except for Sandra, these kids, and that guy from Moonlight, and they begin a new life together in the woods until more crazy people come in and kill Moonlight guy. So they travel down the river with little trouble until they get lost in the woods, where the monsters try and get them, but are so inefficient at their one job that they can't kill 2 kids and Sandra Bullock, who seems to trip like 1,000 times in this sequence. But despite all that, they get to the safe house, and that's the movie. That's it. That's all that happens in this 2-hour-long feature Netflix horror movie. What a waste of time. So yeah, this movie is garbage. Not only is it complete and utter nonsense, but it is entirely unimpactful. It's not scary, it's not funny, it's not emotional, it's just nothing. It's a nothing movie that has no impact on me whatsoever. If you want to watch a movie where Sandra Bullock wanders around and barely does anything and has a myriad of people that just make the dumbest decisions possible, then check this movie out. I think you'll really like it. But if you want a movie that is engrossing, compelling, scary, visceral, or literally anything else, then this is not the movie for you. Despite all the memes that are going on around it, just save yourself 2 hours and avoid this one like the plague. Doesn't matter that it's on Netflix for free. Doesn't matter that so many people are talking about it. It is garbage. Do not see it. Watch anything else. Don't watch it. Do not watch this movie. It's trash. It's garbage. It's a dumpster fire. It's intolerable. It's insufferable. It's